let's do a case study, right? So, one second. So this chappal, right? I am very proud of it. It's my 103 rupees ka Relaxo chappal. This chappal is an instrument of enormous wealth creation. This chappal is a monopoly. This chappal is a monopoly. Nobody can compete with this chappal, right? Now, I'm not making it up. You can go to Amazon.in and check. This chappal retails some days for 90 rupees on Amazon, some days for 103, some days 110. There must be an algo behind it, algo that Amazon must have built. By far on Amazon, that Relaxo ka chappal is the cheapest chappal. Nobody comes close. The closest a company comes is a company called Paragon. Their first chappal starts at 139, right? So imagine chappal, nothing more. One guy is selling at 88 rupees, next fellow at 139, bunch of other crazies selling it at 400, 500, some foreigners selling it at 1500, right? Now, there's a market for everything. People like me who don't like spending money buy the 103, but I love these sorts of things because it gives you straightforward insights into giant monopolies, right? So let's get underneath the bonnet and understand how this monopoly was built. There's no government setting wetting. This is a straightforward business process tech-driven monopoly build, right? Let's start with the numbers. So if you look at the table on the bottom right, Relaxo's profit growth in the last 5 years, including COVID impacted FY20, has been 18%, right? This last 2 quarters has been spectacular, but 5-year average, 10-year average, typically they gun out 20% profit compounding, right? If you see the revenue growth, 5-year revenue growth, it doesn't look too impressive. Until I tell you that larger companies like Bata have grown at 1/3 the rate of Relaxo, right? And when you put, say, Bata, which is I think the most credible of the larger footwear companies, you put Bata and Relaxo next to each other, a fascinating picture jumps out. We just discussed Relaxo's 103 rupees chappal. You'll see Relaxo's products typically retail for 100 to 400 rupees, right? Typical product. They have some expensive product, but 100 to 400 pretty much is their world. As many of you know, Bata obviously sells for 5, 6, 7x that sticker price, right? Yet, profit margins are identical. Return on capital is identical, right? So two companies, one company, Relaxo, is selling at 1/6 the price or in terms of sticker price, but same profit margins, same return on capital, and the company selling the cheaper product, growing the top line thrice as fast, right? How does this happen? How can I build a business like this, right? So here I'll take you a little bit into Relaxo's past, because until you understand the backstory of how a monopoly is built, then you're a perpetual victim of this PE multiple psychosis, right? You've got to go into the backstory to break away from the PE multiple psychosis. So the Dua family hails from Delhi, Punjabi family from Punjabi Bagh in Delhi, which is a suburb of Delhi, which say Shah Rukh Khan also hails from that, from what I understand. So the Dua family owns 74% of Relaxo, right? In the 1980s, till the 1980s, they were a plastic wholesaler in the NCR region, the Delhi region. By that I mean, they used to buy plastic in the wholesale market and sell it to the footwear industry, right? Late 80s, early 90s, on the back of liberalization, they entered the chappal market. They started making chappals using the same plastic that they were selling to others. But I don't think, and I have to be honest, I don't think even I had heard of Relaxo in the 90s or even the early noughties. The first milestone is the recruitment of Accenture. So 2004, the Dua family bought Accenture in for a management consultancy contract, which went on to last 12, 13 years, right? And Accenture did the first 2 layers of comparative advantage building, right? The first thing Accenture did was spotted that the footwear industry does not use SAP. They do not do supply chain management using SAP. So by dint of installing SAP, gradually Relaxo's receivable days, revenue collection days, came down from 90 to what is around 30 days today. Revenue collection cycle of 30 days. So if you look at the other footwear companies, they still take 90 days to collect revenues. Relaxo collects at 1/3 the time, even though they're selling at 1/7 the price to people like me, right? So they crush the revenue collection cycle from 90 to 30. Now, any company that collects money quicker will generate free cash flows, right? Free cash flow बढ़ जाएगा, right? So Accenture and the Dua family then made a very counterintuitive call, right? And this is the sort of most magical aspect of monopoly building. There'll always be a counterintuitive call. And the counterintuitive call here was to take that free cash flow and build factory after factory after factory. Because everybody outsources footwear, right? Those of you who read about Nike's history, Nike outsources famously. Bata outsources, I think Metro Shoes also outsources. Everybody world over outsources footwear. These guys said, we're going to insource, right? Counterintuitive call. Why? Two reasons. They've spotted two things that the rest of the people hadn't spotted. The first thing they spotted was that the Dua family, because they had historical antecedents, skill set in the plastic market, they could get plastic cheaper. They had skill sets at getting cheap plastic. If they outsourced, they were not turning their skill set into a comparative advantage. So they said, nahi karenge, we're going to make it in-house. We're going to take our historical skill set in getting cheap raw material and turn it into a comparative advantage. The second thing they spotted was nobody in India, nobody has built scale in the manufacture of footwear. As a result, you could argue nobody in India has built scale in most things, but in their case, they spotted it in footwear. As a result, they realized if they build scale in the manufacture of footwear, they will have a very powerful comparative advantage. Right? And Ramesh Dua Saab, the patriarch who runs Relaxo, went on to execute brilliantly. In the last 16 years, they've built 9 factories in a place called Bahadurgarh, just outside Delhi. Basically, every other year they build a factory. You can see that, right? See the ROC row. ROC goes 30, 30, 26. That's the factory built. Then it comes back to 30 as the factory gets sweated. Again, 26 as the factory gets built. Typically, it comes up 20 mein nahi aaya because of COVID, right? This year, the ROC is back to 30. So every other year, they basically put up a plant in Bahadurgarh, just outside Delhi. And the result is as powerful as it is simple. Relaxo's production capacity today is 8 times larger than anybody else in the country today. Now, the result of that is startling. As I said, this is the cheapest chappal on Amazon. This 103 rupees ka mera chappal is the cheapest chappal on Amazon, right? Yet, on this product, their gross profit margin is 60%, right? Same as Bata. Their operating margin is 16 or 17%, same as Bata. The return on capital employed is 30%. 103 rupees ka chappal. 8 times larger production capacity. So that was the first layer of build. 2015, 2016, 2 other consultants came into the picture, BCG and Deloitte. And then began the next stage of comparative advantage building. And if you read Unusual Billionaires, the staging is very typical of the Indian monopolist. Step by step by step, you keep at it. First thing these consultants said is, they said, sir, you've done such a tremendous job in chappal. You have driven everybody else out of the market. So Bata no longer makes Hawaii chappals, by the way. Why don't you replicate this formula in sandals? Why don't you replicate this in sandals? So some of you might remember 7-8 years back, these imported sandals called Crocs came to India, right? Plastic, colored, very colorful things, right? Very popular, but very expensive. Used to make my eyes water whenever we bought a Crocs, right? So Relaxo did a desi version of Crocs. It's called Flight, F-L-I-T-E. You can buy it online, right? Plastic covered, how expensive can it be, right? If you look at the Crocs price and the Relaxo price, you say, was paisa banega India mein, right? Just go online and check it. You just say, you see the product, and you go mad, right? So obviously they cleaned up. They cleaned up the sandal market, entry level. They're not trying to do anything fancy. Entry level products, starting at 180 rupees, unka Flight brand. And I think that the most expensive Flight will be 700, 800 rupees. And that gave them the confidence to do sports shoes. So they hired Akshay Kumar as a brand ambassador and did Sparks, S-P-A-R-X, entry-level sports shoes. And that's also done pretty well. So basically, 2015, 16, 17, they fleshed out the offering. Not just chappals, sandals and shoes as well. All entry-level, super, super inexpensive. Then their consultants pointed out that, look, you are using wholesalers. You're using wholesalers to sell the product. You can't build comparative advantage by using wholesalers, right? So for example, 5 years ago, for the whole of Rajasthan, they would have one wholesaler. They would give the fellow the consignment and say, as long as you pay me, what you do with it is your headache, right? And you can't build comparative advantage like that. So 2016, 17, 18, they appointed a distributor for Jodhpur, one for Jaisalmer, one guy for Bikaner, one guy for Jaipur, right? And then they push these distributors to go and appoint dealers, shops on the high street who will carry their products. The result today is, if you see, Relaxo has around 30,000 dealer touch points, twice as many as Bata, thrice as many as anybody else, right? So now let's do a recap. What are the 4 things they have built in the last 15 years that nobody else has? The widest range of products at the entry level, the widest range of dealerships by far, the lowest cost structure, the tightest working capital cycle. And why is this a monopoly? They sell 18 crore pairs per annum. Now let's just step back and think about India. India has 130 crore people, 30 crore like all of us. You know, we buy Nike, we buy Bata, we buy Adidas, we go to malls, we are affluent people. India has 100 crore people who live on less than 1 lakh rupees per annum. India has 1 billion people who live on less than 1 lakh rupees per annum. Those guys won't be able to afford Nike, Adidas, malls, Bata. Right? The annual income is 1 lakh ya usse kam. Those guys, for them, the only organized sector brand that is relevant is Relaxo. And that's why that 80, 90, my 103 rupees ka chappal is an enormous instrument of wealth creation. Because 18 crore pairs is what Relaxo is selling. That means 80% of the market is in the hands of the informal sector. Tax evading manufacturers in wherever, Ulhasnagar or Tirupur or Kanpur or wherever. And as everybody knows, and now everybody can see, COVID, GST, demon is completely compressing this informal sector. And as these guys die, the 80% die, the entire market folds into the hands of the Dua family, right? Obviously, unless anybody here has any other contrary viewpoints, this is going to be a straight 10-year ride, because this price point will keep getting more competitive, right? As they build more and more scale, the price point will get more and more. This is a classic monopoly construct, right? You keep cutting your prices 1 or 2%, costs are rising at 6%, everybody else falls behind by 5-6% a year. 10 saal mein, you're in a class of 1, you are the king of the footwear sector, right? So you ask any other footwear manufacturer, they will tell you, if I could start life again, I would not be selling to this audience, too competitive. We would be selling to that 100 crore Indian janta who earns 1 lakh or less. Now, how much money can they make? Today, I think market cap is 2.8 billion, right? So assume just 20% compounding, nothing more, right? Nothing spectacular. That means a decade hence, there'll be 8x today's size, there'll be 20, 21, 22 billion. That means that a decade hence, Relaxo is likely to be what Nestle India is today, right? And there's nothing fancy here, straightforward stuff. Chappal monopoly built through epic efficiency that nobody else has been able to deliver. And this is the template that other aspiring monopolists are replicating and giving you and me great products and services without any competition. And this journey continues, right? So let's